This is the Hype Squad with Charli McConnell, a podcast where women can be full of themselves and brag about what they're good at. Each week, we're going to bring you conversations covering topics like motherhood, life, relationships, business, and everything in between, because anything is possible with your very own Hype Squad. What's up, ladies? Welcome back to the Hype Squad. I'm Charli McConnell, your host, and today we have Ashley Garcia. Ashley was once an honor roll student and scholarship athlete with dreams of a legal career when she faced a life-changing challenge in a 4-year abusive relationship. This period brought isolation, depression, and lost confidence, yet her journey of resilience transformed her. Rebuilding her life, she returned to school and worked in law, healing deeply alongside her supportive husband, Brian. Following her son's traumatic birth, Ashley pursued trauma and somatic work, bridging mind and body healing. Now, she is a certified somatic practitioner, sex and relationship coach, and NLP expert. She empowers women and couples to find safe, vulnerable spaces for self discovery and connection. Ashley, what's up? I'm so happy you're here.
Me too.
Oh my gosh. So, Ashley and I go way back. I had to force myself to hit record so we could actually get this over with and have girl talk afterwards because I miss her so much. Ashley and I did our sex and relationship coaching training together. So that's how we first met. I've actually talked about you a couple of times on this podcast about like visualization practices and things like that. So I'm so excited that you're here. Oh my
I'm
gosh.
so excited to be here. You launched this, and I was like, hell yeah, girl. We've
Oh
been
man.
waiting.
Yeah, so Ashley, I call Ashley Chef. She calls me Sous Chef sometimes because we all bunked together in the same house. I had Jen on here too, and Jen was in
My
the same
God.
house, so we talked briefly about it there. But Ashley is the mama bear, and so she went into full like cooking and nurturing, and I'm just like, tell me what to do. I'll be your sous chef. I'll cut your vegetables. I'll do all the prep work. You just lead me where you want me to go. And so then became chef and sous chef. So welcome, chef.
Yes. Oh, so good to be here.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So, Ashley, there is so much stuff I want to talk about, and you are such a wealth of knowledge. But I want to start by I mentioned it briefly in the bio, and I know a little bit about this, but I also don't know everything. So, I'm excited to hear about it for myself. But your son, Bo, when he was born, it was a very traumatic moment in your life, which really kind of unveiled this entire journey with somatic body work and everything else that you're doing now. How much can you tell us about that to tell me kind of what happened? Start from there.
Yeah. So it's a long story, so we'll shorten it. But the
Yeah.
the shorter version of the longer story is that he what should have been an emergency C-section became a vacuum delivery, which caused a lot of issues. And he was taken from me in one hospital, transported to another hospital. He was a full-term baby, but he had what was called shoulder dystocia, so he wouldn't have fit through the birth canal, is what happened. And then just by choice of delivery, there was decisions made that impacted how I was healing or how I healed, and that it also impacted his little body at the time. And so he ended up, we were in a level 4, the highest level NICU stay that we could be in, but it was a transport to a different hospital. So we actually spent the first week apart,
Mm.
which, as you know, is incredibly challenging when you're a new mom and you're supposed to be having that time bonding with your baby. We were completely separate. And it was a point in time where my husband, Brian, as you mentioned, he was instructed to follow an ambulance to the hospital. And his mom was with him, and he jokingly, but not jokingly, looked at his mom and was like, I don't want to hear you say anything. I'm turning on Eminem, and we're going to follow the ambulance all the way there. And that he was told lights would go, lights would be off. It was just a transport. But unfortunately, lights went on and things took a really hard turn. He had heart failure, kidney failure, liver failure. His body basically completely shut down. 80% of his blood from his body went to his head. He had a cephalohematoma um, from the vacuum delivery. So there
Mm.
were just a lot of complications. And at that, like hours into birth, it was the hospital that we were at didn't have the tools or the NICU to support him. So in the transport, he needed to be supported there. But the neonatologist met my husband at the entry point where the ambulance was and said, I don't even have time for you to like meet me upstairs. I just need you to do an emergency signature here. We have to do an emergency blood transfusion. and I can't guarantee that we're going to be able to save him. So insert all of the emotions of my husband calling me and me not even being present. And at that point in time, I could tell as soon as he called something was wrong and for the update. And it was one of those, like, we can't both be a mess at the same time. And I
Mm-hmm.
remember him saying, like, my husband's not one who cries. He's in the military. He's very emotionally present and available, but he just wasn't like a crier. But he
Mm-hmm.
was very much in tears and had said, here's what's happening, and we don't know yet. And I remember being very calm, almost stoic, in just my, okay, we're gonna wait and we're gonna get through this. Um, and so there was a lot of unknowns. There was over a month in the NICU where luckily there was a hotel, if you will, like an apartment next to the
Mm-hmm.
NICU where adults could stay. So we had access to that for I think like 2 weeks. We were able to stay there. And like I learned his cry through a wall anytime they had to do x-rays because he had a PICC line up to his heart and they had to monitor things. They shut his body down
Mm.
for 72 hours so they could work on one thing at a time to bring him back online. So through all of this trauma stuff, on the back end of all of this, like, we got to take him home and it was great. But then there were complications around what is this going to look like for him long term? All
Mm-hmm.
the trauma that his little body endured right out the gate. So I remember it being like month 2 or 3, something like that. Like, babies should still be like little rag dolls. And
Mm-hmm.
he wasn't. He was very stiff. Like, he could almost stand straight up and down like a board at like this 2 or 3 month mark. And I was like, all right, something is off. And we were already having to go take him to see like an intermediate physician
Mm.
in the meantime to monitor him. Um, he was on the list for a potential liver transplant because of the jaundice from all of the blood transfusions and everything
Wow.
like that we were going to have him go biopsy for this. And so there were just things that were in line already. And they said, we took him in and they were like, hey, we just want to let you, be prepared for this, that he may have cerebral palsy.
Mm.
And so we faced that hurdle. Okay, let's start having the conversations, like, what's this going to look like and what are we going to be dealing with and how can we support him? And then of course, the emotional burden of Brian and I going, this is not what we thought parenthood would be like, and what are these
Mm.
conversations that we're going to have and how are we going to have to show up now, etc. Fast forward a little bit, we had him in all kinds of physical therapy that was age appropriate as he continued to grow. Little things, and this is going to tie into the somatic conversation as we get into this, but stuff like, he would have to wear what we know as like biker shorts or like workout
Mm-hmm.
shorts. But instead, the way his hips were moved and all the things in order to work those hip muscles, instead of having like the break in your shorts, like where you can spread your legs,
Mm-hmm.
the seam was actually sewed together. And so
Mm.
it made him, like, if he had to do anything, it made him really work his hip muscles to be able to move his legs in any way that he really wanted and stretch those. And
Wow.
so we had to learn how to help him work his body in different ways. Or babies naturally want to stick out their tongue and do stuff, but he was having a hard time like bringing his tongue back into his mouth.
Mm.
And so we had, when he was old enough to be on like baby food, we had a spoon that vibrated, and that's how we fed him. And it would hold onto his tongue and vibrate on his tongue. But because your tongue is a muscle, it was actually working that muscle and pulling it back into his mouth.
Wow.
So we just had all these little tools that were helping us to help him retrain and
Mm-hmm.
connect his body, and helping us meet him so that he could heal in his own little journey.
Mm-hmm.
And sure enough, at like year 2 or 3, we had gone back into this physician that we had to see at every earmark level, and he was cleared of cerebral palsy. And they said he
Wow.
does not have that. And we were thrilled.
Mm-hmm.
It's such a big stressor. I mean, we were driving weekly to a physical therapist and meeting with her
Mm.
years doing this work.
Mm-hmm.
He was cleared of cerebral palsy. And then the next hurdle was he started exhibiting all of these signs and behaviors, and where he would go as he got older, so we're talking like year 4, 5, 6,
Mm-hmm.
he was going nonverbal. He would get really agitated. If there was a big emotion that became present in his body, then he would go nonverbal and he would grunt and he would rock and he would throw his stuffies and he would, I mean, a complete scene. And it
Mm.
would take us 45 minutes, an hour, 2 hours, depending on how long this went and how in it he was. Brian and I tag teaming and getting in and out and trying to like support him, and us as new parents still learning what
Yeah.
support is like for him and really navigating that, which, as you can imagine, 2 hours in on this kind of behavior is taxing emotionally and energetically as well to everybody involved. Um, and so then we were, then autism was put on the table.
Mm-hmm.
And we had to start looking at, could this potentially be something that the next hurdle that we're going to navigate? We got through cerebral palsy. However, that doesn't mean that this isn't something that is now being able to be exhibited. So, more doctor's appointments, more conversations, more support, more leaning in and learning the hard way sometimes what support looked like. And at year 6, we could finally have him tested with a psychologist. At the time where we were, they were like, we won't test him until then.
Mm-hmm.
He needs to mature a little bit. So we had taken him in and had him tested with a psychologist. And before then, even he's been in therapy since he was 4, I believe, and he's 10 now. And so this child is he's no stranger to therapy because we wanted him to have
Yeah.
all the talk therapy, behavioral therapy, play therapy, all kinds of stuff, and then physical therapy. It was just how much support could we give him? And so autism was on the table, and we had talked to therapists about it, and then she referred us to a psychologist who could do more of a definitive testing.
Mm-hmm.
And we went, and he had Bo in one room doing a different type of cognitive testing. He had Brian and I in another, filling out like Scantron style like questions,
Yeah.
so that we could give our version of things. And he came out and he said he goes, I won't say that he's autistic. I will give you the final paper test results soon. But what I can tell you is it's more along the lines of, again, and it depends on who you talk to, whether they prescribe to this or not, or subscribe to this, is Asperger's.
Okay.
His IQ level is through the roof. I am 37 going on 38, and technically on paper, his IQ is up where I am at, and this was at 6 years old.
Wow.
However, biologically, you can't like change biology and fast pace that. So he was emotionally mature at a 6-year-old's capacity. And
Mm-hmm.
so we were dealing with somebody who had an extremely high IQ, but could only be met emotionally at 6 years old in his little body, which left a lot of gray space to play in. And
Mm-hmm.
that meant that when these big emotions came up, he was logically trying to figure this out, and it was like a rat race in his head. There was a little gerbil just like running really hard on the
Yeah.
wheel, trying to figure this out, but his body just could not catch up, and he did not know what these feelings were, how to navigate them, how to digest them, how to process them, how to integrate them. He didn't know any of these things.
Mm.
So this is where that gray space of the grunting and the nonverbalness and these scenes would play out. And it
Mm-hmm.
was like, oh, okay. So information is a big deal. So once we had this information, it was like, okay, where can we learn to meet him in the gray space? And that's where
Mm.
the somatic work came in. Um, I remember going to Walmart one day because our neighbors down the street had one of those little Tykes first timers trampolines.
Yeah.
And my son wanted a trampoline. And then at one of the army bases that we were stationed at, neighbors had a big trampoline, and he would go and they'd popcorn bounce him, and he thought that was fun. And um, so I was in Walmart, which I never go to Walmart. It's just, I'm a Target or any other store girl. And I've gone to
Any other
Walmart,
store.
any other store. Something told me like I wanted to go to Walmart that day. And so intuition kicked in, and I said, all right, let's go. And I did. I ran into Walmart, and sure enough, they had the little Tykes. It was $20. It was in a middle aisle section of Walmart. And I immediately grabbed it and was like, I know what I'm going to do with this. And checked out, went home, introduced it to Bo in his playroom. And I said, you can play on this and jump on it while you're watching TV. A side diagnosis was ADHD for him, which we kind of already knew that. And so he just needed something to move and do all the time. So that was great. In my head, I already knew that when he had his next scenario, though, we were going to use it as a somatic tool. In adulthood, the trend that was going on for a while that was being talked about was rebounding. We need to rebound. We need to give our body a set. We need to like come back into ourselves and give ourselves an energetic reset, a physical reset, move energy through our body. It's really good for you, all these things. So let's take that same principle as an adult and apply it as a child.
Mm.
And so we're going to do it in a form of play, though, because children love to play and it's something that's relatable. They can't
Mm-hmm.
process the big picture thing, but they know that play is fun.
Mm-hmm.
So he had a scene one day, and I could tell that anger and frustration were the big emotions that were present for him. However, he didn't know how to process those or how to say what was on his mind. So he went into the I'm going to grunt, I'm going to throw my stuffies, I'm going to have a hard time, I'm back in this gray space. So I pulled out his trampoline and I pulled it into his room and I said, let's just bounce on this for a minute, Bubba. And we let him bounce on it. And he had this little play ball, like you can imagine, like a tennis ball.
Yeah.
And he was bouncing on this and he didn't want to talk to me. He didn't want words. He just wanted to be angry, but he wanted to lash out. So I said, go ahead and bounce on this. And I took this ball and I said, let's play a game. And while he bounced on it, I would toss the ball to him and he would try to catch it and throw it back to me while he was bouncing. His body now is more engaged than his mind is.
Mm-hmm.
And so we are now, his body is going, okay, we're going to slow down right now. I am bouncing, I'm throwing, I'm catching, I'm bouncing, I'm catching, I'm throwing. And now he's not upset. He's like at that point now where he's trying not to laugh.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm encouraging it. And we're finally getting to the point where he has words. And so once he gets to that point, then it was okay, now we've got this game going. You are completely in your body. Your mind can't take over because I let your body take over. And now let's have the conversation. Hey, Bubba, are you upset? Is something bothering you? I'm mad. Great. Let's talk about that. And I just had to get him to a play space and back in his body and outside of this space of like, I can't feel and I don't know what this is and I'm jittery. And so somatic work, soma being of the body, it was like, how can we meet him in a place where it allows his mind to slow and his body to come back online so that we can start having conversations, so we can start meeting him where he's at, so he can start processing what's present for him instead of trying to just override it with his mind. And
Mm.
so this is how we really got to the state of doing a lot of the body work for him and meeting him where he's at. And at 10 years old now, I will say he's extremely emotionally intelligent and has a lot of words and tools where he can get back into his body that we've built up over, the past, if he was diagnosed at 6, technically we've been doing body work his whole life, but the past prevalent, really hard 4 years of doing all of this work, and it's just been a really big game changer. And then I use that again, the play and using him as my teacher and
Yeah.
guide, and really intuitionally leaning into how I meet him to, again, we just volley this like in the adult world, what could this look like? And then things in the adult world where I can meet him, okay, where can we shift this back down to, like in the child's world, where could we play with this? And just really getting back into the body and figuring out how to navigate what's going on here.
Oh my gosh, Ashley. I did not know like 10%. I only knew like 10% of that story. And now hearing that, holy shit, it explains so much of your story for me, knowing you, right? Like outside of this podcast, because you are such a nurturer and I have seen you like add in the element of play. I've heard you talk about it. I've heard you talk about somatic work for years at this point. And to hear how that all came to fruition for you, it's amazing. And I want to go back for a second, about the birth and about all of the things that happened leading up to getting a diagnosis. I I've said this about Sailor before, like I was meant to have her. I was meant to be her mother because only I could do this for her, only you could do that for Bo, but it also catapulted me into this other life that I would never have gotten the chance to live had it not been for all of the lessons and all of the heartache and all of the things that came from just being a mother, but being her mother in our journey. And I think the thing I want to go back and click on, because we didn't dive into it specifically, is how did you and Brian navigate all of that? Because that was such a hard thing for Colby and I, with Sailor and her epilepsy diagnosis and the doctor's appointments. And I heard you say it at some point about one of us has to hold it together. You said that somewhere along the line. And you said that and I was like, oh my God, like that lands for me so hard, because that was the case for us. Like one of us had to keep the other person in check. We could not both lose our shit at the same time, because it would have just all crumbled around us. How did you guys stay, and this will kind of work into what we talk about relationship wise, about supporting versus fixing and operating from heart and not hurt, but how did you guys stay connected? How did you guys come back together through all of that? Because that's a lot of years of struggle as parents.
Yeah, absolutely. So I love that you said like you knew you were meant to be Sailor's mom. And I knew when I was pregnant with Bo, everybody's like, "Oh, I hope it's a girl." I was like, "I know it's a boy." Like I
Mm,
just knew in my heart of hearts. And fun little fact, like I was born at 5:21 a.m. Bo was born at 5:21 a.m. And
wow.
there was yeah, like he was meant for me. That was my baby through and through.
Mm,
And I'm a teacher for him and he's a teacher for me. As far as Brian goes, I think we just naturally have such a deep bond. And there were times where we struggled we both did lose our shit and we were both in tears and frustrated and looking at each other going, what are we doing? This is not what we signed up for. And I remember we went to one of his a pediatrician. Bo had colic at the time. And on top of everything, colic was rough. He had
mhm.
a couple weeks and it was just nonstop crying. Nothing would make him happy. And I remember his pediatrician telling us, he's like, look, I'm a dad of two going on three, and I deal with children all day long. He's like, my wife and I have been through colic, and I will tell you this one piece of advice that someone told me that I will forever pass on. And that is, you can't do it together as much as you want to. And as much as you're a team, the best thing you can do as a team is do it separate, because you guys are going to want to go in and you guys are both going to want to soothe him when he's crying and you're going to support each other. You're both going to get up at the same time because you're both going to want to be in there. And okay, you're tired of holding him, pass him to me. And you're tired of trying to rub his back or rock in the chair, so give him to me and I'll sit on here, and as a means of support, I'm going to lay here on the floor while you hold him in the chair. I just want you to feel like you're supported. And he's like, actually, that's more of a detriment to you both than it is of support, because now you guys are both energetically depleted and
Mm,
no one is resourced enough to handle the situation. So
yeah.
what you need to do is turn off the baby monitor when one of you goes in the room with him. Let the other one sleep, so that
Yeah.
when you are ready to tap out, one of you is resourced enough to come back, and one of you can refill your cup by sleep or by just laying your head down in a quiet room for a minute. He's like, this is where a lot of parents, he's like, a lot of parents lose their mind and the baby ends up hurt or whatever the case, because both parents are so depleted and so out of stage of losing their mind and frustration, that they're not themselves, is when accidents happen, and then they come back and they're like, I would have never done that had I been resourced, had I been rested, had I been in this state of whatever. And so he was like, do it separate. The best thing
Mm,
you can do together is to do it separate. And so we just stuck with that. And if there were times where we just had to communicate, hey, we were both working full time. I was at the law firm. He was he was a service manager. He was running the service department for Aston Martin of Dallas. And so we were both just in a state of busy at the time. And we would come home and then, be up all night with colic or whatever issues that we were dealing with or stressors. And it became this thing of us continuously asking each other, how can I support you? Something we still ask each other every single day including today. He asked me this morning and I've already asked him. And us being very real about where our where our battery levels are. Hey, I'm at 10% right now. Where are you? And he may be at 30%, but he's got 20% more than me. So he's going to take a little bit more while I resource up to the 30 or 40 or 50%, and then we'll shift.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just a lot of like, hey, where are you at? How are you feeling? And those kind of check-ins. And that's how we continuously learn to do it, was we just took that pediatrician's advice and ran with it.
Mm. I love it. I think what I heard in that was a lot of teamwork, like tapping in, tapping out, seeing it as a team, not seeing it as defeat. And that's kind of, I'm hearing that with what you say, and I think that's because that's what I connect with, because that's kind of where Colby and I got, was if we don't do this as a united front, it'll never work, right? And it's especially for your first, so you have your son is an only child, my daughter is an only child, and I do think that your first child, and now granted I don't have a second to, attest to, but the first child, you were thinking in your head, it's going to be this, like it's going to be this type of journey. And then you're watching your friends around you have different journeys, and not have doctor's appointments and not have surgeries, and there's just so much that happens there of like mourning a little bit of what you thought parenthood was going to look like for you. And that kind of comes and goes, but then it's like, okay, but that's not our story. It's not our story. And the longer we sit in that place, the worse it affects all of us, right? So for us, it was a lot of teamwork. It was a lot of checking in. And we did lose our shit too. I mean, definitely lost our shit. Um, so yeah, and it really does put your partnership to the test. I remember I said to my husband not too long ago, something was happening, and I said to him, I said, this time last year, we were prepping our daughter for brain surgery. Everything else is not shit. Like nothing compares to that. And once you've had this level of gratitude and humility of like, life is finite, these are the only things I need to hold, close to me or that have like significant importance. Everything else is just noise, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's such an empowering thing, and I feel grateful to have that perspective, because a lot of people never do. Never.
Absolutely.
And so I feel a ton of gratitude, and I know you can say the same, of just everything else is more precious when you have, been in those hospital rooms and in those waiting rooms and waiting for doctors to come and pull you inside rooms and give you updates. Like your outlook on life is just different. Just
Mm-hmm.
is. So,
Totally.
but thank you for sharing how that was for you and Brian, because I know just from my own experience that is its own journey. I want to go into some of the work that you do. I'm like looking at my list because there's so many things I want to talk about. One of the things that I really wanted to dive into, and you work on this with your clients all the time, is supporting versus fixing and operating from heart and not hurt. Tell me how that shows up for you.
Yeah. So we'll start with supporting versus fixing. And this kind of goes back to, we all, you can play it feminine energy and masculine energy if you want to. You can call it what you want. Those are the big buzzwords online right now that people use. But at the end of the day, it is showing up in presence versus trying to just come in and do something like a wrecking ball. And so this is something that we've implemented in our relationship, and then I help others navigate, is how can I support you? And it opens the door for us to have self-reflective moments of, what do I need in this moment? If I give myself a chance to check in instead of give an automated answer of, whatever, I like, what do I actually need in this moment? And then being able to give ourselves grace to ask for that. And then also the capacity to receive it.
Mm,
And so when Brian and I ask each other, how can I support you today? There's so many layers to that. It's again, that presence, like, I'm going to take a pause. I'm going to check in with myself and see what I need. And then I'm going to verbalize that to you. And then I'm going to give you space to process that and let me know what you're available for in terms of that support. and how you can show up for me that way. And then how can I allow myself to receive that said support versus coming in and saying, I had a really hard day at work today. Here's all the things that happened. And him going, okay, well, this is what you should have done. You should have done this. You should have sent this email, or you should have said this to this person, or, you need to get online and order this, or you need to do X, Y, and Z. I don't need you to fix it for me. I just need you to be present with me and the emotions that I'm feeling and validate them for me. Just let me know that it's okay. Just
Mm.
let me know that I'm not losing my mind, or let me, just let me have these things because maybe I'm just processing out loud because I've run the scenario through my head too many times and I just need to feel it in my body. Can you sit with me in this moment and just let me feel this? That's a form of support. And so I
Mm-hmm.
don't need you to come in and fix everything for me. I just need you to be present with me. Or maybe I do need a fix. Maybe I need support. Like maybe my support is I would love you to brainstorm how to navigate this issue with me so that we can come to some form of solution. Whatever that solution is, whether it's something that's going on in our relationship, something that's going on at work, somehow we need to navigate whatever scenario is happening with our child right now. And so, yes, I have a problem. I would love for you to help me fix it. Now we can go into strategizing and really coming up with a solution versus just being present with the emotions that are there, being present with me and witnessing me where I am and being
Mm-hmm.
and holding that space. And so, really, there's such a big difference, but a lot of times we are just quick, and it's usually a reaction of, especially if something is uncomfortable, we have a tendency to come in and want to save the person, not because it's uncomfortable for them, but it's uncomfortable for us.
Mm-hmm.
Now I'm feeling something that's uncomfortable for me. So I want to fix it so that I don't have to sit in my own discomfort.
Yes. Oh
And
my
so,
gosh.
yeah. So I really like there's a difference. Can you be aware of what's mine versus what's yours? And can we really just sit with, okay, again, are you needing support or am I needing support in this moment?
Yeah. Oh my gosh, there's so much here for that topic. And I think too, if none of that stuff happens overnight, right? What typically happens, at least in my experience and a lot of the women I've worked with, is you're arguing a lot, right? You're coming home, you're stressed out, you're coming home to your partner and you're wanting to unload and you don't really know how you need to unload or what you need. You just have a reaction, right? You finally feel safe enough. And this happens a lot with our partners, with our parents as young adults, because those are the people that have power. Those are the people who love us unconditionally in theory, right? That we can show our truest selves and we don't think that they're going to leave us or stop loving us. And so those people, unfortunately, get the darkest sides of us because we feel safest around them. And so we come home and we dump the things that have happened on us, and what we fail to realize is the other person on the other side of the room or the other side of the table is coming with their own life of trauma and triggers and baggage to the conversation. And a lot of times what happens, especially when it's your partner, is they want to fix it. They want to
Mhm.
fix it. They want to make you feel better. They take responsibility in the fact that the person they feel responsible for is hurting and they want to fix it. And so then all their shit comes on the table of them trying to fix it. And so it turns into this battle. And unless you have someone that can mirror that back to you or kind of highlight what's happening, you're just fighting all the time. And you can't understand why. Like I can share an experience with my own relationship. I can remember saying to my husband for years, "You're not my person for this. Like I can't come to you and talk to you about this because every time I'm disappointed because you don't know how to support me." And that was such a shitty thing for me to say because I never told him how to support me. I never asked what was happening for him. It was a very ego-driven, selfish statement for me to say that. And I had to back up and say like, what part of this am I playing? How am I coming to this conversation? I am coming into it hurt, upset, in shambles. Of course he wants to fix it. Of course he does. And when I tell him he can't, of course he's upset that he can't, right? And so being able to zoom out of that for me, it was working with a coach. I had to have someone that could highlight that to me because you almost literally cannot do it by yourself. I want to say you just can't do it by yourself.
Totally.
um, and if you can, that's great. Good for you. Like, but then you have the responsibility of doing it. And to
Yeah.
be able to come out and understand your partner, but understanding yourself too. Like, I no longer say that to Colby. I never say that to Colby anymore because now it's like, okay, I need to be self aware enough to say, this is what I need. I
Mhm.
need to tell him. I need to teach him. I need to show him. And then he can do that in return for me. And it was a
Right.
game changer for us. Absolute game changer.
Oh, I love it. I love that you had that awareness to go, what part of this did I play? And
Mm-hmm.
one of the questions that, I will encourage people to ask if for those moments where you come home and you're like, this is my safe space, so I can lay it all out on the table here, lay all my cards out for everybody to see, my person to see. But you don't know what their capacity level is either, just like you said. So I will ask, like, hey, I like, do you have the capacity for me to vent? And I
Mm-hmm.
just want, and then I want to set intentions around that. I just need to vent. I don't need you to fix it. I just need to get this off my chest because I need this like energetically out of me right now. And he'll either say, yes, I do, or he'll put a contingency on it. Yes,
Mm-hmm.
however, I need 5 minutes of my own to let go of something so that I have space and capacity to hold whatever you're going to throw on the table.
Mm.
And so, like, again, it goes back to like, where are your battery levels at and what do you have capacity for? So, like, just asking up front. I was having a conversation with a girlfriend. Even this morning, we met for breakfast. She was traveling through town, and it was this thing. She's like, "How do you navigate some of this stuff?" And I was like, "You'd be surprised that everybody thinks like, oh, it's these big grandeur. I have to have this big action or this big moment of anything to bring to my partner to say, this is how we're going to change and this is what we're going to do." And I said, honestly, at the foundational, the very base level of change and support is a conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Can we come to the table and use our words?
Mm-hmm.
And that just looks like, hey, I need a moment to be completely honest. And can you be in a space of neutrality, or can you, like, what's your capacity, first of all, for me to have this conversation, to be honest? Great, you have the capacity. Okay, so I'm going to put parameters around that. I don't need you to fix it. I just need you to support me by listening. That's my only intention. Also, can you be in a space of neutrality where I need you to understand that this isn't about you? This isn't an attack on you. And I'm going, feel free to check me if I use words that feel attacking. I
Mm.
just want this to be about getting the information out, and then we can address it. But I want you to be in a space of knowing that this isn't about you. This is about me releasing. And then we can come back, because a lot of the times too, like you said, we'll come home and throw things on the table, but our partners want to fix us, but they also hear deficiencies. Well, you weren't good enough and you didn't do this. And yes, I'm frustrated that the house is cluttered because I personally struggle to focus when there's a lot of clutter around me. I'm not translating that to say that you're horrible because you don't pick up the house and I have these expectations of you. I'm literally just saying I feel right now like I'm a little claustrophobic because the house is cluttered. I'm not making it mean anything about you. So please don't take on that story. I
Mm-hmm.
just need to say this. And then afterwards, thank you for listening and letting me be present with these feelings. And then if I choose to say, hey, I actually would really love some support if you would help me to pick up some of this clutter today. And then we're both in a state of a lot more ease and flow, because I feel a lot lighter. You do feel like you've supported me and helped me fix this problem by helping me clean up the clutter. And we're both in a win-win scenario.
Mm.
So just these base level of, can I use my words? Can we set intentions around them? Can we make sure that at the base level we're using, if we can, and have the awareness around it, not make this about, you made me feel this way because the house is a mess. No, I'm taking ownership of how I feel right now.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not wrapping you in a story around that. And I don't want you to I don't want you to take a story on from that. I just want you to be present with me and how we talk to one another and how we show up for one another. And then we can move forward from there.
So I think that one of the biggest things we forget is that we are all such ego driven animals. And it doesn't matter what the other person is saying about themselves. All we ever hear as the receiver is what we did wrong, how we impacted how they're feeling. It's natural. It's a total natural reaction. And that has to be like cultivated over time to be able to like get past that, to not see yourself, to remove your ego. It is a lot of work and it doesn't happen overnight. And it is like a constant challenge to keep your ego in check. But that reaction is so normal. And I will say too, like, this is where therapists or coaches definitely come in handy, because sometimes the venting that you need to have doesn't always need to be with your partner. Maybe it needs to be with a third party, not a girlfriend or a sister or a mom, because that's a whole different level of space holding, but with somebody that can actually give you some feedback and mirror things back to you. It doesn't always, and so that's a great resource too. Like, know
Mhm.
who your people are and what you can go to them, and don't like baggage vomit all of your shit onto your partner all the time. Like, if that's something that is continuously happening, hire a coach. Like, work with someone on the outside that can give you some more balance, that you're not always bringing that home. But also, like, one of the things you in that explanation that you gave, I talk a lot about consent. Obviously, consent is, it can be used in a million different ways, but I talk about consent in conversations a lot,
Mhm.
especially with clients, because it's like, okay, yes, we have rehearsed, we have role played, we have practiced this conversation, but realize you are going to blindside this other person. And that is a very unfair advantage. And they're at a disadvantage. So go to them and say, like, I've even had clients before where they have written their partners letters. Like, this is what I'm feeling. I'm going to leave it with you. Read it. When you're ready to talk, let me know. But I need to prep you. I need to give you some prep work to like, here's what's happening for me. I know that if I tell you verbally in person, that it's probably you're going to get really defensive, and I just want to give you space to come to terms with it. But then I want to talk about it, right? So that's a great practice that I've had clients do that has been great. You know your partner, right? You know you I would expect that you know how they're going to handle a conversation like that. So maybe that would be something. But to always say like, "Hey, there's some stuff I want to talk about. I want to talk about these couple of things. Are there things that you want to talk about?" Making an outline of that so that they're not caught off guard and they can come to the stuff they actually, so it doesn't feel like an imbalance of power, but both people have consented to this heavy conversation. And because you don't know, like, if you're meeting someone at the door and saying, "Oh my God, I've had the worst fucking day," like, just sit back and listen. Maybe they had the worst day. Maybe something awful happened to them that day that now you're asking them to put that on a shelf and they can't, to listen to you, right? And it's so much communication, right? It's like the number one thing in relationships when you're living and sharing your life with anybody. And to be able to realize, like, it's not all about me. Like, let me consider them, even though I think I am, right? I think I'm a good partner and I'm considering them all the time. Am I really?
Mhm.
Right? So, oh gosh, so much. I love the supporting versus fixing. I've also heard people say like, do you want me to listen or do you want advice? Like, before a conversation ever starts, which is also a great thing that you could do at the head of a conversation. Like, "Hey, I want to vent." Okay. Do you want me to just listen or do you want feedback or advice? So that's another option. Let's talk about operating from heart and not hurt. How does that show
Mhm.
up?
So that's a little tagline that I use, operating from a space of heart and not hurt. And that really comes down to being able to check in with yourself and going, is this kind of a trigger reaction that I'm having? Is this a childhood wound that's replaying? Am I using my partner as a role play model to replay a childhood wound of mine? Am I approaching this space from a point of like knee jerk reaction and not giving myself space to process it? Or am I really coming at this, whatever this is, this X factor? Am I coming at it from a curious and open-hearted space? Can I recognize that this is a wound? And one of the hardest things that anybody can have is to understand that in relationships, like to heal relationships, you have to be in relationships. heal relationally, which means that we are going to be the mirror for each other's triggers. We're
Yeah.
going to be the mirror for each other's childhood wounds. We're going to be the mirror for each other's things that are uncomfortable, our shadows, our skeletons, all the things. And we're going to be facing them at some point in time within our relationship. And when those show up, can you meet them with a little bit of love and grace, or are you going to go completely on the defense? And to your point of Brian and I used to do this as well. We actually used to, people would say, a lot of relationship experts would say never write things down or never text message. Everything needs to be done in a conversation so you can understand tonality. And my instinct was if you can better set each other up for a conversation through text message or through written word so that you guys, your nervous system is relaxed versus that whole we need to have a conversation. Because how many of us do we go on defense? We need to have a conversation. I immediately feel like I'm in the principal's office. I don't want to be in the principal's office. Tell me what I did
Mm,
wrong. Again, going back to even what you said earlier, we all feel like we did something wrong.
yeah.
I don't want to feel like that. That doesn't feel good. And that automatically puts up our guards and our defense mechanisms. So we're not even receptive for change. We're not receptive to anything outside of I'm guarding myself from getting hurt. And so we need to be able to soften that and put down our guardrails. And a lot of that comes in the form of relationships when we're mirroring this stuff back and forth to one another, going, okay, I recognize that this is a pattern that's showing up for us. I'm replaying this pattern and you're showing it to me again and again and again.
Mm,
And so I don't want to continuously come through this like a wrecking ball. I'm approaching this from a hurt space. I'm approaching this from a space of a wounded inner child. I'm approaching this from a space of a defense guarded mechanism, and I want to push back because I'm uncomfortable with these emotions that are coming up. I'm uncomfortable with these feelings. I'm uncomfortable with this hurt. I'm uncomfortable with just uncomfortableness of this void that is. And so I am now lashing out. I want to
mhm,
instead come at this from a space of curiosity and heart. Okay, there's a pattern that you're showing me, and like, how can we reframe this? How can we come at this from a different direction? How can I heal this? How can I love this inner child who's actually screaming for attention that needs to be seen right now?
mhm,
And so I really like, are you approaching your partner? Are you approaching your conversations, your disagreements? Are you attuning to one another and honoring where you're at? Do you understand each other's capacity levels? Are you asking each other what you're available for? Feedback, support, reflections. Hey, I need this in this moment. No, I can't give you this in this moment. All of these types of ways that we show up with and for our partners, are you doing it from a space of hurt, or are you doing it from a space of heart? And the goal is to continuously move on the scale from heart or from hurt to heart. And that
mm,
takes work, and it takes time, and it takes some messing up, and it takes some messy feelings, and it takes some messy conversations. And it is work. This is the work that we're all doing. But in order to heal relationships, you have to be in relationships, and
mm,
that you're going to be in some hurt sometimes. But the goal is to reframe, reprogram that hurt into heart, which just means more love, more connection, more attunement, more congruence, more alignment. And that's the space that we're really trying to get to.
I think too, like there's so much self-awareness and self-work that has to come in that moment of if you find yourself being triggered, I guess you could say, by a certain situation, a certain scenario with your partner. Something like I don't really think I'm mad at him, but something's happening inside of me and I'm lashing out. Who is that, right? Who is lashing out? And a lot of the women I work with, we do different variations of inner child work. And it's not always a child version. Like it could be your 24-year-old self, not your little girl, but there's some, I read this or heard this at some point. Like, yes, I'm 37, but I'm also 32 and 25 and 17. All those women that I have been are still inside of me. They're still deeply, deeply part of who I am. And in a lot of situations, when you're triggered, it's a very specific version of yourself that's triggered. Like you use the example of being in the principal's office. I'm thinking of one client in particular that I'm working with right now, where she in relationships she gets triggered And we finally took it all the way back to it being a very um, traumatic relationship with her father. And her father would have this very specific type of reaction that now boyfriends were having. And she was going into um, tantrum's not the right word. That is what we called it, but it's not. Anyone listening to this is not going to think of it the same way. But she would isolate. She would get really quiet. She would get very submissive because that's what she did as a little girl. And that was the way she was like, okay, if I'm just really quiet and I remove myself, everything will no longer escalate. It will de-escalate. It will calm down. And so she was doing the same thing in relationships, but it took so much awareness for her and in our container of coaching for her to realize that's even what was happening. She had
Mm-hmm.
no idea what was happening, but she couldn't stop it. And it had happened multiple relationships. She was the common denominator. And so we finally we traced it all the way back to that little girl and we started healing her. And then it healed in her relationships. And so it's like you may not understand what's happening inside of you when you have reactions, but you have to uncover that. And that does take work. That takes working with a coach or a therapist. Like that is really hard, if not impossible to do on your own. Um, I, we're coaches ourselves and we work with other coaches who help us do that. Like even being a coach, you're not excused from that. But there's always something inside of you that most of the time it has nothing to do with the person you're upset with or the person that you are arguing with or your partner. It's ego. It is something is triggered inside of us and we're going on autopilot and we don't even realize it. So it is so much of that. And then once you discover what that is, what those triggers are, you can put them on a shelf. You can say, okay, I may have had this knee jerk reaction, even though I'm aware of it. I'm going to come back to the table and I'm going to say, okay, that's what just happened. That was not about you. Or I'm going to create enough time of a buffer to say, I'm not feeling like I can continue this conversation right now. Something's happening. I need some space. Let me go for a walk, right? Let me take some time to move my body, work these emotions through before I take it out on you because it really doesn't have anything to do with you,
Oh,
right? There's
so good.
so much there, but it none of that happens quickly. And you have to be able to go back in your timeline and uncover the things that you don't want to think about, but that are coming up in your life every single day. And you're just shoving it under a rug like it never happened. You don't heal from that stuff. I say it all the time. I'm like, everybody wants growth.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone wants to get bigger and better, but nobody wants to do the work. Because if
Mm-hmm.
it were easy, everyone would do it. Everyone would change overnight. But it's so hard that very, very few people can actually start that journey. It's a big undertaking to take for sure.
Oh, so much goodness there. It's why you're such an amazing coach. Oh my gosh, I love you, Charlie. And yes, I agree with you. So many things. There's so many things that come up. When I mean, and so I'll just kind of domino effect here. But yes, one of the things that we do, and I encourage people to do, is to set up rules in their relationship, how they want to show up. And people are like, oh my gosh, you have rules in your relationship. And I'm like, yeah, because it's a checks and balances system to make sure that
Mm-hmm.
we stay in congruence with how we want to show up for one another. So we do have rules. And Brian and I, one of our rules is because I can drop the F bomb like nobody's business, y'all.
Mm,
Uh, it's
same.
a sentence enhancer. There's so many creative ways you can use it. It's a
So
beautiful word.
much.
I
Same.
love it. And we'll be in a conversation. And I come from an Italian background. We talk with our hands, we get big, we're passionate, we get loud. And especially if I'm having a big emotion or I'm frustrated about something and I'm in a form of expression, our rule is you can cuss to me, you cannot curse at me. And there's a difference because to me is just an energetic release. At me is a projection.
Mm-hmm.
And now you're pointing that energy, you're directing that energy at me, and now you are making it about me. And so there are times where, I'll slip and I will curse at him out of means of frustration. And he'll say, hey, that's not how we talk to each other. Let's take a time out. And I will go, okay. And I'll take a breath. And that means that I need to take a beat and we'll come back to the conversation in a
Mm.
minute. and stuff like that. So we set up rules within our relationship that help protect our relationship, and that's a boundary, if you will. A boundary isn't to keep others out, it's to protect ourselves
Mm-hmm.
and make sure we're in alignment and congruence with our morals and our values. And like you said, there's so much work that goes in, and it's why it's important to have a therapist or a coach when you're getting into this, because nobody really teaches you how to do the work. They just use buzzwords and talk about the work, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you get in and you're like, oh, I have skeletons coming up. This shit is uncomfortable and hard, and I'm
Run
done.
away. Yeah.
Run away fast,
Abort.
right?
Abort.
Abort. And so like we have this like societal thing where it's like, I don't want to do the shadow work. The shadow work sucks. And I
Mm-hmm.
remember earlier this year we had the full eclipse, right? Everybody was going outside, especially if you were in the line of the eclipse, and it was full coverage. And so middle of the day and it's dark outside. People
Mm-hmm.
are like posting pictures and videos online of street lights in the afternoon.
Mm-hmm.
And it was this phenomenon. And all I could think of is, for as much as people say that they hate doing shadow work, I was like, here they are celebrating the darkness. And in that moment,
Mm-hmm.
they're just like, this is the coolest thing. And I'm like, guys, there's so much juiciness and so much cool that's in the shadows if you're willing to allow yourself to go there. Because this is the healing work. This is where on the other side you're like, I'm not feeling as frustrated. I'm not feeling as heavy. I can love deeper, and I can receive love deeper. And back to your point with your client of being able to pinpoint a period in time of like, oh, this is why I was reacting this way, because I had this relationship with my dad and this is how he would react. And therefore, my body remembers this. Let's go back to the body. So I'll
Mm.
ask people, when you're having these reactions, can you take a breath and recognize where in your body you're feeling this reaction? Are you feeling it in the pit of your stomach? Are you feeling it like it's a headache? Are you clenching your jaw? Are your shoulders up? Do you feel like you're making a fist in your hands? Like, can we recognize patterns within our body? Because those are also smoke signals. And if you
Mm.
recognize that you're out and about and all of a sudden you feel like you're clenching your jaw again, that's a telltale sign that you may be going into a pattern or story, and you can
Yes.
catch it on the onset. Your body is sending you smoke signals.
Mm.
And you can really check in with that to see, like, where am I at in this moment? And then give yourself space to release that. So yes, attachment styles. What did I grow up in? A lot of times I work with very like high driven type A, if you will, personality women who are used to just like you and I, entrepreneurs. We do the things, we go forward, we handle business, we take care of shit, like we tackle things, we go forward, we have momentum, all of this. And that means that a lot of times some of these women, like, they have a hard time softening and allowing themselves to be held, or being able to, a man to come in and say, I'm not trying to like take over, I am trying to help support you. But they don't know how to receive that because they're Miss Type A independent, but they've also taken on a role from a child where they've been a child that was, took on like a parentification role, because
Mm-hmm.
maybe their parents weren't emotionally available to support them. So they found means to support themselves. Or the role was reversed where their parents started showing up in childlike behavior. And in order to find safety, they were actually parenting their parents as
Mm.
children. So now here we are as adults in relationships where we have to parent our partner in order to find safety, or we have to parent our partner in order to feel a certain way in our body. And we just need to be able to, like you say, release some of these old stories, or go back and pinpoint where we were feeling these things or experiencing these things, and then ask ourselves, do we, can we find safety in other ways here? Can we
Mm.
these things? Or maybe it's like you said, every different age version of ourselves. Are we in a teenager stage, like are we in that emo rebellious teenager stage who wants to, just go balls to the walls with things, and we just need to have a moment of rebelliousness? I need
Mm.
to be a rebel without a cause right now. And maybe that
Mm-hmm.
just means I need to cause a little bit of chaos. And chaos doesn't mean, chaos within the relationship. Chaos means, can I release this in a playful way and see what
Yeah.
comes, right? So I recently took a group of girlfriends, and we have this really cool place locally. It's like this, basically like this Pinterest building. You could go in, anything that you think you could do on Pinterest, you can do here.
Wow.
And we went in and they have these rooms where it's a paint room, a splash room, and they dress you up like you're in this like Dexter gear, basically. And, the full on like plastic paint wear and goggles. So like the only thing you can see is this much of your face. And they take you in this room with canvases, and you can Alexa play whatever music, you desire. And you have, like I said, blank canvases, and you get to throw paint. The whole, all
Wow.
the walls around you are just covered in layers and layers and layers of paint. But you get to go in there, and I'm like, how fun is it that we got to go in? We started off, I think, with like some rock rage music, and we ended up like twerking to like Cardi B or something at the end. And it was like this
I love
progression
it.
of energy release, right? I just needed to go cause some like chaos for a
Mm-hmm.
second, get some of this pent up energy out of my body. And we were just slinging paint at canvases. And then you get to take this piece of art home that was reminiscent of where you were in that moment. And you get to see this is what I was feeling on the inside, and here it is on the outside. And now I get to let it go.
Mm,
And because I let it go in such a playful, fun way, I am now present with the bigger version of me, a more healed version of me, which makes me better able to love myself and those around me
mm.
and
Oh
be in.
man, I want to come to that building. I want to go back to what you were talking about with like the shadow work. The shadow work is where shit changes. Like that's where the growth happens, but it's so confronting to go to those dark places of trauma or just the things you don't like about yourself, right? And I think that you really there has to be an ego death of some kind for you to be able to go to those dark spaces and to be able to untangle who that version of you is, because if you don't know who that is, you can't really be in the light fully if you don't know who you are in the shadows. But it is so difficult for people to go there because we want to be happy. We want to be shiny and we don't want to, we definitely don't want anyone else to highlight our faults, but we don't want to see them at all. And I do think that I heard someone say this recently. She was talking about our generation, so like millennials and on. So, everything after millennials. We are the first generations with the luxury of having a existential crisis, of having these deep seated things come up for us and work through them and get to evaluate and move forward. Our parents were just surviving. They didn't have the option of going deep into their own traumas. They needed to check the boxes. Are you fed? Do you have shelter? Do you have clothes? Do we have a car to take you here and there? Are you going to school? Like, okay, then you're good, right? Everything else, I don't know how to work with. But our generation and on, it is a huge responsibility to not only have that luxury but then to do something with it, because what's going to happen is our kids are being raised this way, the generations after us. So you're going to wake up one day, our generation is going to wake up one day, if you don't do this work at some point, you're going to wake up in your 40s and 50s and everyone around you is going to be so enlightened and so in check with themselves that you're going to be the outliers. And I think about my husband, for instance, like he did not start going through his own journey until the past 2 years, but just in 2 years, it's been huge for him. And had he not been married to me, there's no telling how long that would have taken because I have been pushing him for years, but he had to be ready for himself. But I do think that, especially if you have kids, raising your kids and trying to not continue, generational trauma, which a lot of people, that's such a common word that people talk about. But if you're raising your kids the same way you were raised, that's generational trauma. If you associate that with trauma, or you hold on to, well, this is what my parents did. I hated it, but it's the only thing I know, so I'm going to do it for my kids. That's what that is, right? You are just continuing the story. And I think about, that movie that came out, or the book with Colleen Hoover where she talks about It Ends With Us. That's the title of it. And it's a bigger story. But I thought that the message of that, the title alone of like, it ends with me. I get to choose to not raise my children the way I was raised. And I'm not speaking from my own personal experience, but just in general. But you have to unpack all of that before you can change it. So obviously I could get on a huge soapbox about that, but I do think that like the somatic work of getting into your body is such a huge piece of that, because so many people walk around with anxiety and they just take a pill for it. And I'm not going to knock people taking medicine for anxiety, because there are varying levels of that. But normal walking around anxiety, what I like to call it, that's your smoke signal. that's your body saying to you, like, something's happening. Like, my sleep's not right. I'm feeling jittery. I'm having all of these smoke signals, is like what you call it, Ashley. Check into that. Like, that is not something you run to the doctor. Like, go deep first. Maybe you do need medication and that let that happen later. But check in with yourself. What's not in alignment? What am I holding on to inside of my body? Because your body is like, I have to get it out, and you're not letting me get it out. So it's going to show up in all these other ways. So talk to me about the sacred sensuality workbook. Does that go deep into the somatic work? Does that cover any of that?
Yeah. So again, going back into the body, which means really taking time to be present with where you're at in your body, and that usually means slowing down. We are in such a fast-paced world. Everybody loves the idea of like, I don't do McDonald's, but like, let's do the McDonald's drive-through because it's convenient, it's quick, it's the quick fix, it's the quick hit, it's the dopamine that we need in the moment, right? It's the dopamine hit, let's go. And that's because we're busy. We're busy running businesses, we're busy raising kids, we're busy being in partnership, we're busy if we don't own a business, we're in a business of some sort. Like, we are busy in life in general. And so it becomes a luxury to sit down and have a slower, like a steak dinner where you're intaking everything in the ambiance of the space and like really checking in. So I use that analogy to say with this workbook, it really is about slowing down and teaching your body to slow down more often, which means let's touch base with all of our senses. And so this workbook is a guide where I take you through all of your senses, and we discuss what sensuality is. And everybody experiences sensuality differently, but at the end of the day, it's how can I feel more or just be present? I don't need you to feel every emotion that comes through. Like, that can be overwhelming to the nervous system as well. I just need you to understand that we don't need to be on autopilot all the time. I was actually just having a conversation with Brian the other day. He was having some issues sleeping, and he was like, "Oh, this is different. It used to be that I had to have the TV on to go to sleep, but now I turn the TV and like I had to watch it to go to sleep, but now I turn it on and I go straight to sleep." And I said, "That's your body." I was like, "It's more habitual than anything." For years and years, you checked the box of you had to make sure all the doors were locked, all the windows were closed, all the blinds were shut, every like there were boxes that you had to check before your body went to sleep. And I
Mm-hmm.
said, and it became a habit. And now that the boxes are checked, your body's like, done, sleep. You
Mm-hmm.
don't do that thing anymore. And I said, we've become this thing where everybody has these habits that we fall into, and we become on autopilot that we really don't feel. We don't understand what's going on in our bodies. We aren't checking in. The smoke signals come up and we've dismissed them because we have something better. I don't have time for this right now. And then we wonder why we're full of resentment or illness or whatever. And so this guidebook literally takes us through all of the five senses. I give you examples of what each of the senses could include. So if you have touch, all types of different textures that you could be touching, tools that you could implement for touch, and same thing with foods like taste, different types. You have your sweet, your savory, your umami, like all these different things, different types of aphrodisiac foods that would go with this, how to savor what you're with, instead of just like, oh, I'm gonna have a chocolate bar, but like, can you suck on that chocolate bar for a second? Like, let it melt. Like,
Mm.
different ways of being present. And then each one has a journal page with it where it will ask you questions reflective of each of the senses. Like, can you think back to one of the smells that takes you to like a happy memory in your childhood? And like really be present on journaling out some of these entries, and just again being really present with each sense. And then sometimes it's just enough of a slowdown to go, ooh, I noticed this in my body,
Mm.
or I've given myself permission to like feel in different ways. Feeling doesn't have to mean that I just touched something textilely. It just means that um, I can feel the breeze against my skin. I can feel that the sun is hot. I can feel that the sand in between my toes versus grass underneath my feet are two different feelings, instead of
Mm-hmm.
just walking somewhere. And so really just taking time to slow down. So this guidebook is a long guidebook of sensuality, taking you through the senses, bringing you back into your body and awareness with each one, giving you examples of each, journal prompts from each, and then even examples of where you can go buy and purchase some of these things that will enhance these for you.
Oh my gosh. I can't wait to dive back through this workbook because I remember when you first did it, and I'm sure it's probably had some evolutions over time, but I'm so excited to go back through it because just hearing you talk about it, I'm like, oh, yes, I need that. I need more quiet in my life, like more slowness and more quiet. So that's a great reminder. I'm going to put the link in the show notes so everyone listening can find how to get because it's a workbook that you have and it's great. And I know how much effort and work you put into it because I remember hearing about it at the time when you were working on it and I was so proud of you for doing it. Um all right, so I could keep talking like this forever, Ashley, but for sake of time, we're gonna have to cut it. And I want to have girl talk after we hit record or we finish recording. But I want to ask you for your hype list. And I don't think I mentioned this before we started recording, but the hype squad, I have everyone come on here and because the whole idea is that I want you to brag and be full of yourself. I want you to really, really step into that feeling of being proud. And so the hype list is an assignment I give, which is like achievements and obstacles that you've overcome in order to achieve things, just things that you're really fucking proud of. And so I would love for you to share at least one thing that you can be full of yourself for a minute and let us all celebrate you. Just at least one.
At least one. Let's see. I am really fucking proud of the healing work that I've done. I'm really fucking proud of being able to tap into my intuition and
Mm,
let that be a guiding light. Had I not listened when my body said, let's go to Walmart, then I wouldn't have had a little Tykes trampoline that turned into this whole somatic practice. If I
mm,
had listened to my intuition when I needed to have a really good conversation with Brian, we could have built up resentment through the years. If I hadn't listened to my intuition when I said that shadow work doesn't have to be so fucking hard all the time and made it playful, I wouldn't have had the lightheartedness to enter into all of these coaching and client relations where I get to be a bridge of light and dark in a playful aspect. So I'm just really fucking proud of myself for tuning into my intuition and saying, yeah, I'll listen.
oh my gosh. I love that. I love that. I say all the time your intuition, women's intuition specifically, is our superpower.
Yeah.
And sometimes the anxiety, the smoke signals are happening because you're not listening to those intuitions. Your body keeps sending you all these signals and you're not. And so then it's like, oh God, you don't trust me, right? Like all of these other things start to happen. Um, that was beautiful. And I could have listed like five other things I wanted you to be proud of. So I love you so much, Ashley. How do people work with you? Are you working with clients one-on-one currently?
Yes. So I'm doing one-on-one client work right now. It's mostly over Zoom. Everything is accessible to me, so we can do those types of calls. You can find me on Instagram. I'm sure Charlie will put my handle down
I
there.
will.
Way. I always tell people, I'm like, most people are like, oh, the DMs. I'm like, please slide in my DMs. Let's chat. Let's have a conversation. So come find me, come slide in my DMs. Let's have a conversation and we'll go from there.
I love it. Yeah, I'm going to put all the ways to find Ashley. Ashley, thank you so much for being here. Chef, getting hyped with me and everyone listening, be kind to yourselves and stay hyped. And we'll see you next time. Bye.